Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story. I was a partner in a small firm back in the mid-90s. I was a named partner in the firm, but one of the partners made it a point of emphasis. He was Black and he was prominent in his community, and he made it a point of emphasis that he wanted our firm, even though it was majority white, to be a force in helping to advance people of color, not just Black Americans, but people of color in the legal community. So he really made no bones about it that if you had two equally qualified candidates of different races, his preference would have been, well, I want to give a hand up to somebody who's Black, somebody who would bring about some diversity of viewpoint in the firm, et cetera. And
might I just point out that as it is June 2nd of 2020, that like every cell in my body is like, where are you going with this, Elliot?
Yes, I know. Well, that's exactly right. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, because it goes back 25 years.
Okay.
And it's so relevant today, I believe. Maybe you'll have a different opinion. But so anyway, so in the mid to late 1990s, we had a firm that we probably had about 15, 16 employees, half Black. And then the O.J. Simpson trial occurred. And I really should have looked up the exact dates, but the O.J. Simpson trial occurred. And I remember being in our lobby with everybody crowded around a TV set waiting for the verdict. And we had a discussion as we were waiting for the verdict because the wait seemed interminable. Mm-hmm. And it was the first open and honest discussion I remember having about race in a professional environment when you had people of different races. You had people with, a stake in that fight. And there were a number of the Black attorneys and a number of the staff who would say, look, there's no way that he got a fair trial. So it doesn't matter whether he did it. The system was stacked against him. If it's a guilty verdict, I'm going to be really angry. And you had a lot of people, myself included, on the, I would say, the white side, for lack of a better way of saying it. But that's how it appeared. To say, well, wait a minute. If he's found guilty, he's found guilty. This is the system. If the system finds him guilty, he's guilty. And
because this was easily, like 25?
25 years ago.
Yeah.
So we had really full conversations about that. And it was one of the places where I start to mark, not the very beginning, but one of the beginnings of my education about race in America. Mm-hmm. Talking to people who were were just without rancor, but were willing to talk to me about their experience. Mm-hmm. Because as much as I can look out through the eyes of having been raised as a white male in this society, and I can see certain things, and I can read articles, and I can read books, and I can see reports, I would never have the experience of what it's like to step out of my door as a Black person or a woman or somebody outside of my experience. So that was the first part. And then we come to the present day, and it's been on my mind a lot, because a lot of what I learned 25 years ago in those discussions, and a lot of the ways in which I realized I was really kind of ignorant 25 years ago.
It's a little there's so many things that when I look back 20 years, moving, and not just racially, but like gender things and whatever. We have a whole story about the beginning of European vacation. That's a different story, but that a friend of mine and I had recently. But it is interesting to look back on your 25-year back self and cringe. You're like, oh.
Yeah, and I don't even remember. There's not like I said something that I wish I could take back. I don't remember that, except I remember really not having a frame of reference for what the people on the other side of this discussion were talking about, because I wasn't raised that way. I wasn't seen. I didn't come into contact with what they have. But now, 25 years later, I'm so thankful for that discussion, because while I still can't put myself in those shoes, I'm not. I was raised in as a white male in this society. I can see it a lot better.
Well, you said something I think that was quite possibly the most profound thing in all this to be aware of, is that something that I'm only more recently more aware of, which is the distinction between, yes, I have not said things. There was never a time in my life where I walked around throwing racial slurs. In fact,
Right.
because I grew up in a predominantly, a predominantly white area, mostly in West Virginia, actually predominantly Italian so I was probably a minority just because I wasn't Italian in my town. But like I remember getting to college and somebody saying something about a girl, I think her name was Sarah. And one of my roommates was like, "Oh, is she Jewish?" And I was like, "What?" Like, I don't know. How would you, what? And they're like, "Well, what's her last name?" And I said her last name. And she's like, "Oh yeah, she's Jewish." I'm like, how did they know that? Like, I didn't even, what is that? That's not a thing. So to me, that felt like not being racist, but I think for so much of it, this whole layer came off, like picked a scab for me when you may take that to like, okay, it's not about what not saying the things. It's all the blind lack of awarenesses of things, which also came to me in college. By the way, I just want to back up for just a second. I'm really grateful that this was your story. Part of the reason I didn't have a story today is that this is all I can think about. And admittedly, I almost get weirdly emotional saying this. I don't feel like it's our story to tell. I mean, we are not the authorities of like, how do you deal with this in business? Here's 4 points on what to. My answer is, I don't know. Like, this is hard, complicated, messy, tricky stuff.
But I think that's how you deal with it, though.
Yes.
I really think
Yes.
that one of the things you said actually a while ago, or maybe when we were even just texting back and forth, you've said a number of times, until people feel heard, you can't have a discussion until people feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to make sure that we talk about that. But to your prior point, I don't think you have to, as a leader in business, let alone as host of this podcast, I don't think we have to say, here are the answers. This is how you deal with it.
No, and in fact, I think that's part of the problem is is imagining that answers are the answer right now.
Yeah, but I do think that it should be talked about. And I think that there are a lot of wrong answers, but one right answer is, I believe, admitting that you don't know how to talk about it, but you feel that it's important to discuss, or you feel that it's something that shouldn't be ignored.
Yeah, no, couple thoughts. And I want to make sure I hit on both of them. But so I talked to my sister last night who was struggling with a question that she had about a thing that she had reacted to one way. And then she had read some other article that basically said, that's not the way you're supposed to react to that or whatever. And she was like, now I feel like I was trying to do the right thing and it was now the wrong thing. And do I delete it? Do I take it back? And I said, Brittany, there's a lot of value in just simply saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Like just saying, it's not about you. It's not about you doing the right thing. It's about it being okay to do the wrong thing, or just say like, I don't know what the right thing is, but I'm here and I see what's going on and it stinks. And I don't know what else to say besides that. And that's okay. And that's why it reminds me a lot of conversations about death and grief, because I often hear people say, well, I didn't go to the funeral, or I didn't reach out to that person or whatever, because I didn't know what to say. And I'm so clear on that context of it. Like, it's not about like there's no thing you can say. You don't say, like, there's no words that can come out of your mouth that'll make losing your husband or child better. Like, that's not, if that's what you're imagining that there is, no. Just showing up and saying like, I'm here, I see you,
right?
And
Just
this is
showing
awful.
up.
Just showing up in some way.
Yeah, even
the value.
And whether it's death or whether somebody gets diagnosed with cancer and say, well, I don't want to mention it because if I mention it, that'll it'll make it awkward for everybody. So I'll just treat them like there's no difference. But it's not. There's no difference.
No.
It's a big thing.
Right.
And here to just treat it like, for example, you said that you were relieved this was my story. Like if I came on and said, I had this really horrible interaction when I ordered jeans the other day, and I'd like to talk about that.
That felt gross. And yet I was feeling so lost in my own stuff about this that I couldn't articulate my version of it. But talking about anything else today other than this feels gross. And interestingly, I've had at least 2 calls today from people who, God love them, I almost feel a little bit not cool about telling this story because I don't want it to feel like I'm making fun of their thoughts of how to make it better. Because these are people who have smaller companies. I actually don't know. I don't even have great ideas about what the answer to this is. If you have much, if you are the CEO of a 200-person company, I'm not sure what the right thing to do is. In both these circumstances, I am grateful that these were smaller companies where I had an answer that felt, not even an answer, but just a contribution of an option that felt more right to me. Because everything they were, so both of these calls, here are the things that were clear. They were feeling much like us. So they have some number of their staff who is a person of color of some variety. In awareness of that, they didn't want to say nothing because that felt gross.
Fair. Okay.
But I will say everything that was on the odds, they're like, so here's what we're thinking. And I won't even name the things on the off chance they ever listen to this podcast. I don't want them to feel I called them out.
And I'm like, please don't tell me it is ...
And I'm not even going to confirm or deny, but just everything they said, I was like, oh, oh, definitely not that. I'll actually make it a parallel. The things, and actually they did not suggest giving people money. So I want to be super clear about that. But to me, they all felt like saying like, I'm so sorry your husband died. Here's $100.
Yeah.
Here's a gift certificate to Ruth's Chris. I mean, neither one of those is on the list. Trust me.
But you still get into, there's a false message. So for example, if one of my larger clients said, hey, Elliot, I'm going to send out like a company-wide memo. We here at ABC Company really sympathize with this. And I would say, yeah, just stop making this an official.
Yeah, it's not an official thing because I think, and again, I don't even, these may well be the wrongest answers that there are out there. But my gut right now, which could be wildly off base, is that there's a lot of value in just saying, I don't know. Like expressing a want to figure this out and be a contributor to the betterment of what's going on, but not feeling like that has to come with some kind of wisdom or answers about what that thing is.
Well, I'll tell you what was well received. I actually wrote to my students. Now the term is over. The class is over, but I wrote to them because it's about 50-50. It's Towson. It's a very diverse student body. And I wrote to them and I was expressing my hope that they're safe. And one of the reasons I wrote to them is because I teach public speaking. And so I was through that lens. What I was saying is these are important times, and these are in ways horrible times of ignorance and intolerance and hate. And if you learned nothing in my class, I hope you learned that your voice matters.
Yeah.
And that silence is not the best option. And I hope you lend your voice to a reasoned discussion, but to make changes because Lord knows there are changes necessary.
Oh, God.
No, I wasn't preaching, but I sent out this memo and I've gotten so many responses from the students saying, none of our professors reached out. Nobody reached out. Thank you for at least saying something. They weren't saying I had the right answer, and I wasn't trying to give them what the answer is from my pedestal, but just acknowledging that this is going on out there.
Yeah, and I think that's the really tricky zone because I mean, here's how it's sort of sorted out thus far, and my ire on all of this has been building for this past week or so, however long it's been. It hit a lighter fluids burned on the charcoal last night for me personally. So, but I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people who know that they don't want to be silent, and that is possibly one of the most important and hope-inspiring things I've seen is far more people not wanting to be silent than before. And then also being conscious of, but if I say a thing or do a thing, is it the wrong thing? And I think, I don't know about this. I feel like maybe it's better to do something, even if it's the wrong thing, than nothing. And I think if you're going to do something or say something, the simplest awareness of not making it about you and your perspective and your voice, the perspective of just simply saying, I want to acknowledge that I also have a lot to learn and I don't know what the answers are. And this goes back to a bunch of episodes we've had. In fact, I actually think our very second episode was called something like, Is Leadership About Looking Dumb, or something like that. I forget what our kitschy title was, but it was all about how really powerful leadership isn't about having the answers. It's just about convening the space for the questions and the conversations that can change a thing. And I don't know what the right way to do it, but I'm at least a tiny, I'm feeling a very small amount of hopeful sparks out there right now, if I'm completely honest. But the fact that so many more people are at least wanting to not be silent, and then also aware that they shouldn't just inherently trust their instincts, which sounds like a weird thing to say. I don't mean don't trust your instincts, but just the awareness of maybe my instincts that are born out of my life experience and my already had perceptions maybe aren't entirely the best navigation point, and that this is a time where I need to listen and learn.
Well, I think
and be
that's
open.
That you have to listen, because I think that many times in leadership, people do decide that, well, as a leader, I'm supposed to make the pronouncement, I'm supposed to set the policy. And I've said on certain things that the role of a leader is, in many times, to put a stake in the ground and say, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
And I do agree that the role of a leader is to do that, or to say, this is what we stand for, this is what we don't stand for. However,
which is probably the part we can say right now, like, we're really clear we stand for not that.
Right, but at the same time, people get very hung up on the words. So I read that Ellen DeGeneres had made a I don't know whether it was a tweet or a Facebook ad or Instagram or whatever, but she had come out on social media weighing in on this, and she used the term, the phrase "people of color," as we have in here. And she got a lot of negative blowback from people saying it's not people of color. This happened to a black person, and it should be Black Lives Matter. And fair point.
Sure.
That she was talking about. She was trying. They said that she was trying to soft pedal it. When I'm not sure that.
Yeah. That's so interesting. That's a really important distinction, because I think if the first part of what you said is, like, somebody says a thing, which is better than silence, right, even if it's the wrong thing, and then you use that to, like, forget even all the things we're talking about, just in general, you throw a thing out, somebody else adds a different perspective. You're like, oh, okay, great, right. Like we navigate down to, like, I don't know why, but I just had the weirdest, like, I've never even watched The Amazing Race, but kind of where that, like, you're quickly trying to solve a puzzle, kind of, you're like, oh, right, good idea. We'll work that in here. That kind of, like, quick triage to, okay, good point. Was trying to do the right thing, misstepped. Perfect point, though, I understand. Boom, now we're looking at it this way. But the part at the very end you added of, like, ascribing intent, I always take issue with ascribing intent. Like, was she trying to soft pedal it, or was that her best understanding?
So the point is, I wouldn't want people to view what happens when celebrities misstep and the negative blowback they get to make them trepidatious about actually saying anything, right, because they're not the same as the celebrities. First of all, there are celebrities. When you have millions or tens of millions of followers, you could say today is Tuesday and you would get negative blowback, not only because you're wrong, but because there's a conspiracy and you're trying to mislead people. So that's one thing. I think that as a leader in a business, whether it's a business of 2,000 employees or 12 employees, hopefully there's a bedrock feeling of, until proven otherwise, I believe you're trying to act in good faith and in accordance with our core values. But so I hope there's that. And I also hope that leaders who decide to speak on this, at least at a local level, are transparent that they don't have answers. Don't try to stake out a prescription for it, but rather can say, I'm just as concerned as you are. This is disturbing to me, and I don't want to let it go without saying anything. And maybe even bringing people into the conversation, hopefully. Is there something we should do? Is there whatever? But
that was kind of where I didn't finish on that's kind of where we wrapped back to when those people called me was, the circumstances that I was talking with someone about. We're talking about a handful of people that they want, staff members and whatnot. Like a phone call here is a way better option than a memo, so that you can just talk with a person and connect with them. Because for all you know, I mean, I doubt this very seriously, but for all you know, someone might be like, I don't really give two hoots about this. Or you're like, all right, well, I just wanted you to know that I am aware. And I doubt that very seriously, but just that awareness versus trying to have some sort of like memo. But I do think there's one other point in there of, I think just even inherently trying to navigate best on what won't, because you're right, like celebrities have way more audience. But even if you don't have the audience, and even if you're just worried about your friends, trying to navigate based on what won't get my fingers slapped by someone is part of what we just have to get over. Like, this isn't about this isn't about us. This is about like, okay, like I might be wrong. Because the other thing too is it's not like there's a council who's making decisions about which thing is right. I mean, for many, many years, I've struggled a tiny bit because I have some friends who prefer that I call them Black, and I have some friends who prefer African American. So every time the word wants to come out of my mouth, I'm a tiny bit like, I don't know what the right thing is. But that concern, if that makes me not say things, that's because I'm worried more about me and the perception of me than I am saying the thing that needs said. And to me, that feels like the really salient point of all of this is if you stop yourself from saying something that feels important because you're worried about how you will be perceived because of it, that is the place to look, because that is focusing on the wrong part.
Well, and I also think that there's a second step, which is as a leader, you put something out, but you have to be willing to examine the perspectives of other people that come back and say, okay, well, maybe I said this wrong, or maybe I should do this, or maybe I should express it this way, or maybe we can do that. Which, by the way, I know this sounds like just a built-in segue, but I really mean it. I would be more than fascinated. I would be hungry to read the responses of our listeners in the Facebook group as to the conversations that they're having, the conversations that they think should be had and aren't being had openly enough, or the ones that they wish that were never ventured into, because I think this is a perfect part of where our community can come in very handy. Yeah,
because if ever there was like touchy stuff, well, it's funny. As you know, I've known Christy, who in our Facebook world is known as Kay. I've known her for many, many, many years, and she is a person whose perspective on these things I trust quite possibly more than any other human. She is the person that I look to for guidance when I'm confused and when I don't know what's the right thing or even like where to focus. Not only do I always look to her for guidance, but I have learned from her already many, many, many. There are countless things that the first time I've seen her say it on Facebook over the years, I get a bit of an eye roll and I'm like, oh, okay. I don't think I agree with that, whatever. And then either in that moment or like another moment later, she'll like say it a different way. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, interesting. Oh, wow. I hadn't made that connection. Cause like the other version sounded like a little bit too like, I don't know, like there's a nuance that I hadn't really considered. And then all of a sudden what?
Too Canadian.
No, not too Canadian. Is there such thing as too Canadian?
I don't know.
I feel like the Canadian scale just gets like better and better and better. Like, is there? Can you be like badly Canadian?
Well, I think milk in a bag. I think.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Canadian. Aside from milk in a bag, I think being like additionally Canadian is only a good thing. But
and this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly how podcast episodes go off track, because I throw in one thing, Jody's making a really important point.
We're trying to.
And then we wind up with milk in a bag. So
yeah, exactly. But just to finish that off, because we do need to wrap. I have many, many times, like peeked through a window because of her that I hadn't seen a thing through. And all of a sudden, then it's this crazy experience of like an entire veil lifting. And then I see all these things I'd never seen before. And I'm like, whoa, that is insane. Like I was blind to that. And in a space where I thought I had a really clear view. So that's all just to say, not to just, I could, by the way, much like you, I can imagine her cringing, listen to this part of the episode, trying to do show notes. I guarantee you it won't show up in the show notes, although now it will because I said that. But had I not, she would have just skipped this whole part where I was lauding her praises.
Can I just say I feel you, Christy, on that?
But that's all just to say that she is such a valuable resource, and that if you bring a question there and it feels like a scary question to ask, she will come to that conversation with an experience of that vulnerable conversation that you have yet to have, because that's why I go to her with these things. So she's way better at it than I am, and probably you. So like, this is a place where I would have actually called her in as an expert on these kinds of things. Now she's crazy cringing, so we should just wrap.
Okay. But the moral of that story is, please lend your voice to the Facebook group.
Yes, please.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
Your stories.
You can find links to that group, as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email, and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.